Awesome. Well, and I have to say that the big reason why I'm involved in a lot of this is because of Max, and what Max is really trying to do in bringing people across from, together across the globe. As we know, the politics of the world can be really crappy, and most of the people that are supposed to be representing our interests aren't really representing our interests. So I think that you guys, this young generation, really is the promise. And so oftentimes I hear people in America, they may say, the young people, they're snowflakes or they're weak or whatever it might be. But what I really see is a group of people who are very purpose driven, very driven and looking for meaning in their lives. And so when Maxime talks about the spiritual component of business, or what I want to call is the humanity part of business, the part that is recognizing and sees that there's a bigger, we live in a large ecosystem, and our behaviors and the things that we do affect this ecosystem. So mushrooms, like what the Smurfs lived in, mushrooms that grow out in the woods. Well, those mushrooms have a network underneath them of roots that spread hundreds of thousands of miles, and they're all connected, and they work with the forest, and you can diagnose the health of a forest by the mushrooms. And so this is the same thing that I'm seeing in business. And what I really wanted to share with you guys today and speak with you, and I'm available for any questions you may have. If you guys have specific topics that you would want to talk about, you most certainly can raise your hand or interrupt me and ask me at any time to explain something deeper, to slow down. I may have speaking too quickly, but my real goal here is to help, is to share with you what I think business is really about. And oftentimes what we hear or what we see is, I want to call it, I think people would call it the syndrome of the founder. I think it's the cult of the founder, right? Like, we're going to be a Mark Zuckerberg or some type of Steve Jobs. And, the problem with most of these types of ideas that are really behind them is they don't really take into account what it is that we're doing in business and why businesses are successful. So if we take a look at my very first computer in 1981, I was 12 years old. And so my very first computer was an Apple computer. Most people didn't have a computer. I was very privileged and was fortunate to have one. And the reason that Apple and the reason Steve Jobs became so successful was because they took a product that was only available to the extremely wealthy people, and they made it affordable to the everyday people. In other words, they took a service, they took something, and they were able to leverage that something to lots of people. And so that reward came back to them in a meaning and significant way. And oftentimes what happens in business that I see, and it's truly a crime, I call it the tyranny of metrics. People want to go ahead and operate things by KPIs. And they oftentimes are judging or evaluating these KPIs based on scale. How quickly can they scale? How quickly can they increase their revenue year after year? How quickly can they do these things? And when they use these metrics to do it, there's lots of things that go on in a transaction that can't be measured in a metric. For example, how do you measure inspiration, right? How do you measure creativity? How do you measure hope? How do you measure love? How do you measure anger? And if you really think about every decision you've made, I promise, no matter what you think, every decision you've made has been made off of a feeling. And I'll tell you how I know this. Because the part of the brain where feeling goes on is called the limbic region, right? It's not the prefrontal cortex, it's not the brain stem, it's that area in between. This is where all your feelings and emotions and all that good stuff is. And when that part of the brain is damaged in an individual, no matter who it is, they all have one thing in common. They cannot make a decision. So in other words, when the ability to have a feeling is impaired, so is the ability to be able to make a decision. So if you really think about the customer and how they're making the decisions based on what they're going to buy or what service they're going to use, or if it's a business to business transaction, what business they're going to partner with, what is it that what's the most important thing we could focus on? The very thing that's the hardest to measure, feeling, right? How do you measure hope? How do you measure anticipation, inspiration, love, anger? Very hard, because it's all very subjective to each and individual person. And so oftentimes what I see when, as a young person, and you're out going to be building a business that is, I believe, meaningful in purpose. It's like a purpose-driven business. You guys are doing this for more than just to be wealthy, let's say, right? Money's great for what money's great for. But I know a lot of wealthy people who thought money was going to solve their problems, and it didn't. What happens is they think that when they have money, they won't have these sets of fears anymore. But really what happens if they didn't actually deal with what was the fear, again, feeling, the fear of what was going on. When they go get the money, now there's just one more fear, because now they're afraid of who's going to take their money. Because when you're afraid of who's going to, when everything is based on money and all your security is based on money, well, that means it only takes you losing your money to be insecure and at threat again. And the fact of the matter is that the things that are going to be the most meaningful and purpose-driven in your life, if they're creating an advantage for other human beings, you will make money at it. And so this is really what the key is to me in business. And we're going to go into this a little bit deeper, but the idea is like social equity, right? You guys get, I mean, it's sort of, the term explains itself, right? Social equity. Today, and what I believe Maxime is really building in these courses is social equity. We've come and we're participating in a class together. In the beginning, we sort of got to know each other a little bit. Hopefully you guys will have some questions that allow us to get to know each other even better. You reach out to me and you send me a note that says, hey, I had a question about this or whatever it is. And we start to have these social transactions that occur, right? This is social equity, right? If you think about it, our attention, our focus, our attention is our real currency. It's real time. It's right now. What am I paying my currency to? What am I paying my attention to? Right? And if I want to, the currency of relationship is attention. If you think about anybody that you want to have a relationship with, anybody that you have a relationship with, whether it be your dog, whether it be an activity, whether it be whatever you may do, you are paying attention to something to create a relationship with it, right? And this is really what the currency we're talking about is. And while I understand that, you know, when there's a return for what I'm paying my attention to, it makes a lot of sense. So like today, hopefully for you guys, there's going to be a return. You're coming in, you're paying your attention, and in exchange, I'm going to share something with you, hopefully that's meaningful and makes a difference and you can use, as opposed to the news. I don't watch the news. I don't care about the news, because the news uses my attention against me. It first grabs my attention, then it pimps out some fears, and now it asks for more of my attention because of that fear. And pretty soon I'm giving all of my attention to the news, because that's the way that it's designed to operate and move down the road. I could be sitting here, and even if it was just a one-on-one meeting with any one of you, I would get more out of it because we would have an exchange. And every time you have an idea and you share that idea with another person, there's an opportunity for that idea to be improved upon. And really, when you become a world-class person, when you start thinking in a world-class way, you realize that you'll have lots of ideas. Ideas come all the time if you're open to them. So I share ideas. I'm not worried about someone taking my idea. I actually hope they'll take my idea and make it better. And so if I'm going to pay my attention and I want to focus on something and create a business that's worthy, I'm going to remember that the true currency I have is what I pay attention to. And it's through building those relationships, whether it be one side is my customers, but probably the most important are my employees or my partners or however it might be. I have a saying, I use it in all fields. I use it in management. I use it in sales. I use it in just everyday, parental things. I say, they don't care, whoever they is. They don't care unless you do. People care about you when they feel you care about them. If you want to be a great leader, care about the people that you lead. And then they'll go to bat and work all kinds of hours and they want success in the business because they know because you care about them, any success that you have, they'll share in and they have too. It's a very natural part of how the world operates. And what's difficult sometimes is that we don't really see that. Our evolutionary positioning is quite the opposite. If you think about it over, the millennia, hundreds of thousands of years, that from the trees to the grass plains, that we evolved into human beings. It was the organisms that were adverse and avoided risk that we eventually became, right? The ones that didn't avoid risk and handle risk correctly, they're the ones that died. If you didn't avoid that snake, if you didn't avoid that bear, if you didn't avoid that rocky cliff, you died and your line didn't get passed on. And so by a natural, by a natural evolutionary standpoint, we're programmed to see risk, to avoid risk, to look for risk. And so we have to discipline our minds. We have to master that. We have to start to program ourselves to look for opportunities in which we can show that we care. We can pay that attention and then see if it's reciprocated. If it's not being reciprocated, we should not pay our attention to it. Again, it's a relationship. But oftentimes, because we have this evolutionary programming, in addition, this will be a little closer to you guys. Now, first of all, I want you to remember, as a young person, the neurology of your brain is different than my old hardened brain. And so sometimes I'm going to say things, or I'm going to say, here's how it's done. And I'm going to make it sound like, oh, it's so easy. But really, the internal dialogue to do it may be more difficult than it's sounding. Because as a younger person, social acceptance is much more important for your survival than it is for mine. I've had children. I have resources. I have plenty of great social equity and relationships. So it's very, even from an evolutionary standpoint, my brain has changed physiologically, where I no longer create certain chemicals that make me concerned about what other people may think. Unfortunately, or fortunately, really, ultimately, it's a fortunate thing. But when you have to live with it as a young person, sometimes you're afraid to step out. You're afraid to turn your camera on. You're afraid to speak up. You're afraid to put yourself forward because people may reject you. And rejection is much stronger for a young person because if you get rejected by spouses, you won't have offspring. If you get rejected by your community, it'd be hard to create an income. I mean, if you think about it, it was just a couple hundred years ago that getting exiled from your community was a death sentence because to live on your own is practically impossible. So this social acceptance that's wired in you is just part of who you are. And it's okay when you know about it, then you can start to game against it. And you can go, oh, it's that silly social acceptance, and sort of try to calm it down for yourself. And there's a key to life that will be, I'm going to give you guys a piece of advice here. This is probably one of the most like core things I could share with you with getting along and meeting other people, particularly strangers. And there's a word, there's an English word. I hope you know what it is. If you don't, you can look it up. But the word is intimacy. What intimacy is about, if you, I like in English, I break it down into N to me see. In other words, when I'm intimate with you, I'm allowing you to see inside of myself. I'm dropping my walls. I'm becoming vulnerable with you. Now, this was much longer for me than it was for you guys. But as we started, our hormones started to kick off, and we started to like be attracted to other people and want to have a mate, like junior high, 13, 14 years old. We wanted to be vulnerable with someone. And when we expressed that to them, they laughed at us, or they rejected us, or we thought it was no possibility. No way, ha ha, whatever, we got made fun of. And it hurt. And when it hurt, we went, I'm never going to be intimate first. I'm going to allow the other person to be vulnerable first. And then when they're vulnerable, I'll be vulnerable. Now think about the formula. I'm going to allow the other person to be vulnerable first. Then I'll be vulnerable. Now, this formula is one of the most common formulas I've run across. It's called a belief formula. People don't even understand that it's in their brain. It's so down deep in their belief system that they have to allow the other person to be vulnerable because it hurt when they were vulnerable first. But when I come along, and I'm vulnerable, I'm open, I'm intimate, I play, we have fun, that equation gets activated. And because I'm vulnerable first, they become vulnerable back with me. And I have a lot of deep and meaningful relationships around the world as a result of this. I have in Minsk is some of my most dearest and closest friends. And because of my ability to open myself and be vulnerable with people. And so as I've gotten older, it's become easier for me to do this, right? I don't have those same chemicals, same physiology going off. But I can tell you guys, the sooner that you can master this for yourself, the sooner that you can just shrug off when someone is mean or rejects you or whatever it is, and realize it's because they're small. When people are mean, that's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on how small they are. Anyone can be a mean asshole. That's easy. Anyone can be a drunk. But being someone who's nice regardless, someone who can keep their shit together. You know, there's a great poem by Rudyard Kipling. I would suggest to look it up. The poem is called If. And again, it's by Rudyard Kipling. And the first stanza goes, if is the word in the middle of life. If you can keep your head about you, while all those around you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. And that's what you're going to find. When people start to lose their shit and they get all excited, they're going to blame you. And if you can keep your head about you, if you can keep calm, you're going to win. And, you know, in other classes, we'll talk more about some techniques and some things that you can do to do that. But the key really here that we're really talking about, and what I'm really wanting to share is that business is about people. And it's why I'm involved in Max's program, because Max is the core of this program is business is about people. And it's about getting you guys together from different parts of the world at a very young age so that you're able to take advantage of the cultural strengths of each area and the realizations that you may have that you could that you can use from one area to the next. So I'll give you an example. In Belarus, there's a factory that makes a special kind of carbon. There's only 3 factories in the world that make this carbon. One is in France and one is in America, but those 2 only sell to the military. They don't sell to anybody else. These are bandages, right? This is like a bandage type material. And this carbon, when it gets put on, let's say, a burn victim, because it's carbon, bacteria won't collect in this at all. As well, the skin won't stick to it. So you don't have to do skin grafts. You can actually cover a burn with this, and the skin can heal back on its own in its own way. This particular piece of carbon is for heat. And so if you have a big old oven and you need to, protect heat up to, I think, 3,000 degrees, you're able to do this. Now, I found out about this carbon company because of a friend of mine who's not in carbon, and we just drink together and have fun and all that kind of stuff. He knew I was into business, and he had this friend, and the next thing you know, I'm meeting with them. And right now, because of some of the political things, everything's on hold. But I was able to because of my international aspect and because of my understanding of capital, people are the true capital. I'm in the middle of a business opportunity that will probably net me tens of billions of dollars when it gets done. Now, of course, there's political stuff, there's regulations, there are all kinds of headaches. Trust me, it's not like I'll be earning the money, and the products that we'll be making are here to help other people, help burn victims and people along those lines. So this is just one example, and I could go on to, I will be I go to Tokyo in November. And specifically, while I'm in Asia, I'll head over to Thailand. I have a guy I buy sapphires from over there, a unique sapphire that was recently discovered. And again, I met him by some people in Tucson that, again, have no relation to sapphires whatsoever. But because of my human capital, because of my social equity, I was able to find myself in these positions. And so, as you're walking through and sort of learning about business, there's always the glory side. That side isn't really what business is about. When you read, I would suggest that you, instead of reading magazines that are from today, glorifying some company founder, go pull magazines from 20 years ago, look at the founders they were glorifying, and then see what happened since then. Because that'll be a much more accurate story for you of what someone is really about than some momentary piece of fame because a journalist needed to fill a magazine. And so we don't want to be influenced by TV or by media, social media in particular, that creates a false sense of what success is. Success is really pretty easy. For me, it personally, it's how many 3 to 4 a.m. friends do I have? Meaning, I'm stranded. I'm stuck at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I need to call someone for help. How many of those friends do I have? Right? And so this is really, we all have our family, hopefully. I actually didn't have much of a family, but some of us are in that case. But a lot of people have their family. And that family is a great well of resource and of inspiration. But family can also be like beloved thugs. I mean, I love my family, don't get me wrong, but, if I'm successful, my family wants to tell me why I can't be. If I'm going to take some risks, they oftentimes are afraid of me taking those risks, not because they don't want me to succeed, but because they don't want me to get hurt. So I need other resources, other people I can reach out with and talk about ideas with and exchange with. And if I'm sitting on my couch waiting for people to come to me, it's never going to happen. But if I go out in the world, and even though I might make some mistakes and I might say some things wrong or whatever the case may be, I'm out meeting people, I find these opportunities. And it's been proven many, many times, over and over and over again. There's more power in being wrong than there is in right. Right? It's very hard. This is a very hard idea, particularly in Eastern Europe. This is a very, very hard idea. I've spent enough time over there to know that I've watched the learning styles in Eastern Europe, the teaching style. The teaching style is very aggressive. They want, they're going to scream at you to learn, so to speak, right? Which is really counterproductive as well. But the it's like failure is not an option. Failure is the worst thing that you could do. But I have found many times when I tell people that I made a mistake and I'm sorry, they're actually much more human with me. They're much more willing to share with me when they make a mistake. They're much more willing to, we're able to talk about and find common space much easier. And there's lots of research to show, I can't quote specifically, but I do know that there were two different situations where they used AI. And they had these humanoid robots working in groups of people. And some of the robots were programmed to make mistakes every once in a while. And when they would make a mistake, the robot would go, I'm sorry, guys, robots aren't perfect either. And then they found that those groups, when they were worked, those groups became more productive and actually had better results with the ones that had the robot that was willing to make a mistake and admit it. Then they had another one that was, it was like a online, so it was like AI, virtual AI. But again, no one knew it was AI. Everyone thought it was a person. And these groups were interconnected through these different people. And the AI would make mistakes every once in a while. And they found that not only when the AI would make a mistake, would the group become more productive and work better, but it would spread out to the other groups that they were connected to. See, this is the power of being vulnerable. When you're willing to be vulnerable, and trust me, it's going to feel strange at first, and you're not going to get the results you expect at first, but without trying it, you won't know how to fine tune it. But when you start to become vulnerable, you'll realize that the world is more than willing to work with you. I mean, think about it. Ever known someone who was really great at something, or maybe a lot of things, but they were an asshole? They weren't a nice person. They were sort of arrogant. When they would did you ever really want to help them? And in fact, if they fail, there's a party that sort of enjoys it. It's like, well, I'm glad you failed, asshole. But let's flip it around. Think about the nice person that you know, the nicest person you know. You would do anything for them. I taught my children are all a little older than you. They're in their 20s. And I taught them, you can fail at everything, but don't fail at being nice. Because when you're nice, people will carry you over the finish line. They'll help you. But when you're an asshole, oftentimes they'll trip you up or push you down because they just don't want to, they get thrilled in watching that happen. And so this is really a big part of, as you're navigating and figuring out what you're going to be doing and how you may have business ideas. You may just know you want to be in some type of business. You may know that you like people. You may know that there's, it's okay to say, hey, I want to make lots of money. That's okay for it to be your purpose. Because you'll meet other people who say, I want to make lots of money, right? But it's going to take, again, a collaboration with other people. And they don't care unless you care. This is really what to me, the essence of business is really about, right? It's about showing, whether it be your customers or your employees or the other vendors or your partners, that you care. There's a great American businessman, in my opinion. His name is John Mackey. He ran a store, a group of stores here called Whole Foods. They got bought out by Amazon. And he created a type of capitalism or school of capitalism called conscious capitalism. And in this, it was back in the 60s or 70s, this idea came out in business that said, the main idea or the main focus of a business is to earn money. And it has a fiduciary responsibility, a money responsibility to its stockholders. That's its main goal. And ever since then, businesses have become crazier and crazier and crazier. The ratio of CEO salaries to what everyone else makes has been insane. So John Mackey comes along and he really bucks that trend. And he says that No, 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 no. There's a responsibility more than just to the stockholders. There's equal responsibility to the customer, to the other employees that work there, to the vendors, to the community that the business is located in, and then to the stockholders. And that all of those considerations needed to be considered when you're considering the implications of your actions. So in other words, if I'm a chemical company and all I care about is making profit and my revenue, do I really care where I dump my hazardous waste? No. But if I understand that the community I live in, the employees and my customers will all have an equal investment in the company and its success, then I make those decisions differently. And so as you guys are putting your ideas together, you're going to hear a lot of business people, and you're going to see a lot of business people, and they're going to have a lot of awards, and they're going to have a lot of letters behind their name. And you're going to realize that all they really care about is scale. All they really care about is revenue. How quickly can they scale in revenue? Because that seems to be the standard at which a lot of them are judging themselves by. But there's others who are out there, to me, that are much better models to live in. If you have to look back, if you think to yourself, you know, you're 70 years old or you're 80 years old, and you look back on your life. If I'm 50, I turned 52 this past Monday. So when I look back on my life, there's lots of mistakes I made. And there's things I regret. Actually, I regret more of what I didn't do than what I've done. That's a different story, but remember that. You'll regret more of what you don't do than what you do. But my point being is that you're going to be at this point. You're going to be able to look back at your life and you're going to say, did I do the right thing? And I've met some business people who did not do the right thing. And they've told me when I was young, like you actually, and I used to go search out business people to learn from. And many of them told me, don't trade the greater freedoms of tomorrow for the lesser freedoms of today. So in other words, doing your homework or doing the schoolwork that you're doing is very important. You can be free. You can say, fuck this, I'm not going to do this homework. But if you do that, you won't find yourself in a better position to be able to make a better income, and you won't have the greater freedoms that that better income will give you. You'll be a street sweeper or some type of state worker who's making $200 or $300 a month, not some type of business owner or some type of investor who's making tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands a month. And so this is, with that kind of money, there's freedom. There's freedom to help other people. There's freedom to be able to do what you want. So ultimately, and it's the same thing. If I break laws to make money, well, I'm going to lose my freedom. I'm going to get caught, and it won't matter what I did. So we don't trade the greater freedoms of tomorrow for the lesser freedoms of today, even though sometimes it's tempting. You'll have friends that do it. I'll share a video with Max that he can share with you that I really, really like. It's about a photographer, and he shoots these awesome videos. They're like these really cool scenes, natural scenes, and there's lots of activity. And his name's Devin Supertramp. He's on YouTube, and he's got some really great videos. But he's got one called Why I Do What I Do, I think is the name of it. And it's about a 5-minute video, and he talks about all the sacrifices he had to make to be able to become the photographer and the create the videos. And he's not very old. He's in his 20s. And he says this one line in there that's really great. You know, most people plan for the weekend. He plans for the next 4 years. And that's really what, you know, I have, I'll be glad to give you guys, if you reach out to me, I'll give you a PDF copy. But I have a book on Amazon that's built around a book called Think and Grow Rich. It's a workbook. The Think and Grow Rich is a book that was written in 1930. The workbook I have on Amazon goes along with it. But it's really all about creating goals for yourself and understanding that if you want to have something in life, what are you willing to give? What are you willing to sacrifice? And this video that Devin Supertramp does is a really great example of that. You'll see all the sacrifices he made to make these great videos. sleeping in trucks and barely having the money to make it happen, but he did it, made it happen. And so really, if there was one thing that I would attribute my success, any success I've had, or anyone else's success when I speak to them, if there was one thing I would say it would come down to, it's persistence. Don't give up. Don't give up. You're going to fine tune everything else. You're going to fine tune how to create relationships. You're going to fine tune how to sell. You're going to fine tune on how to recruit people. You're going to fine tune on how to create, all that's going to be fine tuned over persistence. You keep doing it. 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 In America, there's a saying, there's many ways to skin a cat, right? So there's lots of ways. If you peeled the fur off of cats, if you skinned cats, they say there's lots of ways to skin a cat. But the guy who has been skinning that cat for 20 years, who's been doing whatever for 20 years, that person knows how to do it perfectly because they've done it over and over and over. They've made the mistakes over and over. They fine-tuned the process over and over and over. So it's through your persistence that you'll be successful. So we covered sort of a broad, wide range of things today. And if there was anything I would say to be persistent with, it's to remember that they don't care unless you do. And if you can remember those two things, everything else will work out. That is in your control. So that being said, does anybody have any questions or comments?